Hey, so one of the questions that gets asked probably most frequently in the workshops I run is when do you determine whether someone is going to turn around their performance or not? So typically we're talking about an underperforming individual that we're working with and we're trying to suss out whether we should continue to invest our time and energy with that person or whether we should call it quits. And so this is a kind of model I quite like to talk through where if you've kind of got one axis, you've got performance, the other axis, you've got time. And you'll see let's just assume that this is kind of satisfactory job performance. And the difference between someone that's going to turn it around and someone that's not, and in the early days is maybe a little bit hard to see. There's not much separating them. And what we want to try and predict is there any indicators that the person's going to uptick their performance or the person's going to decline in their performance? And generally, there's a couple of things to look out for here. But before we kind of even start considering what are some of the factors to do with the individual, I always say to leaders, make sure you kind of ask yourself the question, am I doing everything I can to set this person up for success? Do they have the tools that they need? Have I given them necessary feedback? All those things to make sure that as a leader, I can hand on heart say, I've done my part to make sure that this person succeeds and performs in the role. And then when you are getting to that kind of awkward period of, I guess, here, trying to decide, okay, are they going to make that upturn or not? There's four things kind of I tend to look out for. The first one is looking at ownership and accountability. So what I mean by this is when you're speaking to the individual, when they don't take ownership or accountability, what you see here is that they'll typically blame other things or other reasons for their performance. Whereas those that are more likely to turn it around will kind of recognize their part in it and their role in where things are not going well or right. So that ownership and accountability piece is really key because if they're consistently blaming other factors, external factors and other things, it's hard for them to then recognize that there are things that they need to do differently and they need to change to resolve their performance. So ownership and accountability is number one. The next thing I tend to look for is, especially if you're kind of having one-on-one conversations with them every week, is around seeing some form of progress. Now, progress might not be super tangible, but at the very minimum, what I'm looking for is things that you're discussing with them. So actions and activities that might help address their performance. They're putting those into play. And that's really important because if you're having those conversations, only some of the things are being done and others are not. Again, it's going to be very difficult to see that uptick in performance. So that's really important. Now, beyond that, what I quite like to see is initiative. So, yes, you're going to talk about things with them that they should be doing, and that's great. But are they going over and above? Are they, let's say, for example, you've told them to improve their communication skills. Are they finding chances to take on courses, practice their communication in different ways? Are they really kind of stepping up to try and do things differently and taking on board the discussions that you're having and finding new things that they can kind of do themselves beyond what you're just prescribing to them? And the last element I'll add on here is something that kind of came up in a workshop recently, and it's a kind of a recent addition, is around, are they demonstrating kind of self-awareness? So are they actually showing consciously and proactively that these are the areas that they know they're good at, these are the areas perhaps they're less effective at? Are they kind of showing awareness around those areas? And are they trying to better leverage their strengths to improve in their role and where necessary work on those areas which are not so strong? So those are the kind of four qualities. I think if people show those, there's more chance that their kind of performance will improve and increase. Now, just because someone might end up in the position where they're not necessarily showing these things, or for other reasons their performance decline, I think it is important to realize that this does not mean the individual is no good. I think sometimes it can be quite dismissive to go, the person was just, they were a bad hire or they were useless. And I think it's a pretty dangerous mindset to get into. I think that there can be a couple of other reasons why this happens. Firstly, we've got to be mindful of, we might actually just be the wrong manager for this person. So the reason they haven't succeeded is just the manager-person fit isn't particularly strong. And I'm sure you can think of times where you've worked with a leader that's really good, that fits good and it gets the best out of you, and times where you've worked with a leader that it doesn't quite mesh and it doesn't get the best out of you, and your performance isn't as high as it could be. I think sometimes it's a case of admitting as well that it could be the wrong role for the person. So actually the role that they're in doesn't best utilize their skills and strengths, and actually another role is better for them. And that could be within the company as well. So you've made the effort to hire them, they've made the effort to kind of get into the culture. And I think if they show kind of good alignment to your culture, good cultural values, and don't fit into the role, and they do actually show some of these qualities as well, it might be worthwhile seeing if there are other opportunities in the company for them. Alongside that, I think sometimes it's the wrong team. So I think this kind of aligns with the wrong manager. Sometimes that team blend isn't right. And again, I'm sure there are instances where you've worked in a team and it's, you click really well and it's humming and that's awesome. And there are times when, again, you're in a team, it doesn't quite gel, the skill sets aren't quite complementary, and your performance suffers as a result. And ultimately, it could be that the person is actually really good at their job. They get along well with you, they get along with the team, but the company is just not the right fit for them. So the culture might not be right. The stage, context of the company, where they're at the moment, that might not gel particularly well with the individual. So some individuals operate well in a kind of high growth, ambiguous scenario. Other individuals operate better when it's kind of more stable and there's less change. The company situation could be not right for them. The company values might not align well with them. There's a whole bunch of stuff to do with the company. So if they moved roles, went into a different organization, they do really well. And this also explains instances where they've been smashing it at their previous company, they come into your company and don't do so well. It could well be the company or one of the other factors. Great, so I hope you found that useful and insightful. And look, hit me up. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this particular model and maybe any other factors that we should be considering when we're looking at whether someone's going to turn around their performance or not.